having resources and people to reach out to. And definitely, it is super important for you to build your network. And I think that's where I'm going to get started, just because I started off not knowing how to get started, and it all started with an email, literally. I got an email and about a workshop series very similar to this one that CYN was hosting. I had never heard of them. And I was very passionate about this. I had seen it in my community. I knew how important it was. And I was pre-med, I was passionate about healthcare and things like that. So I decided to just randomly sign up because it sounded interesting, and I went. And I think that was the moment where like my eyes opened and I realized like, oh my goodness, like I can actually do something like myself, like not stand on the sidelines about it. So I went to that workshop and I realized there's a lot of resources out there, and it like literally just takes one person to be passionate and like get the ball rolling. So when I got back to my campus, I decided I needed to do something, right? And I think that's how a lot of people feel, is like you feel like you're alone. And that's kind of how I felt. Like I felt like I was the one person on my campus that cared. So I started saying like, okay, so how the heck am I going to get started? So what I did was I went on my campus website and I started looking up who's in charge, who's important on campus, basically. And I just started blind emailing because I didn't really know what to do. That could be a good start if that's like the only like strategy you have. And that's how I started, is I started reaching out to the president of the campus, the vice president of the campus, and like everyone I could. And I just started saying like, hi, my name is Adriana, and I'm a very passionate student on campus about this effort. And our policy is currently this, and we want it to be this for these reasons. Can we please schedule a meeting so that we can talk about any advice you have for me or resources you can share? So that's how I started. And I got a few replies. And I want to say, I think the most productive conversation I had was with, it was actually the vice president of student services on campus. And he didn't necessarily give me like a pathway, but he said it was possible and that he was with me and just be ready for a long road, right? So he didn't say no, and that was the biggest part, is it gave me that hope. And then at that point, it was just like figuring out what to do. And at that point, I felt a little lost. So that's where CYAN comes in. Like they have a lot of resources and they know a lot of people. And I really recommend that you take down these contacts of the people that you're hearing from, of the people at CYAN, because that's what I did. I reached out to my contact at CYAN and I said, hey, I went to your workshop. I'm really excited, but I'm kind of like lost. Like I don't know what to do. And fortunately, they connected me with a group that was local near me, that was just getting started on starting college groups in the Bay Area. And that's where I met Owen. He's on the call, and I just want to give him a big shout out because he's a big reason why he just keeps us on our path, and he just keeps us like on there, and he's part of this nonprofit and joined my group, and then we started recruiting. We started recruiting for a group, and I think that's another big important part, is having like a group of people. So that was pretty much it, like meeting a local person that was also involved, reaching out to people on campus and realizing who's there. I think that was a good starting point, and the recruiting part is where my sister comes in. So I'll let her take over.
So hi everyone, I'm Tatiana. I'm her sister. And so basically my sister, she was, the whole email part, I wasn't part of that. She was kind of just doing her own thing and somehow didn't tell me. So all of a sudden she tells me and she's like, hey, there's this group on campus. It's super interesting. I got to know them. And I'm like, okay, cool. Because she had found out about different things through her pre-med clubs and I'm not a pre-med. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll go. And I wasn't really sure if I could fit in because I thought it was all, health and, pre-med path. So I was like, I'll go. I felt bad for my sister and I went. And so I went and I was like, I'm not sure if I fit in. And so whenever you start recruiting, I'd say for me, what was really impactful as a person coming in, not knowing what it was and just hearing about it and sounding interesting, was that the people, basically Owen and the team on campus, they opened it up icebreakers were key because I already felt nervous. And those icebreakers really made a difference for me to kind of get rid of the nerves and realize, okay, I can belong. And then it was kind of, getting to know each other. And I was very honest and like, I'm not a pre-med. And they're like, that doesn't matter. I'm actually in pre-law. And then it was advocacy and also just in smoke-free efforts were connected really dearly to my heart just because of family. So then I started finding those connections and finding out how I could fit in and how this was really something I wanted to get involved in. So definitely, I would say if you're trying to recruit students, definitely kind of focus on that open space of everybody is welcome and kind of making people feel comfortable through icebreakers. And also another thing is kind of being flexible and honest with each other with the communication. For example, for me, I came in at a time where I was really busy with my schedule and I was very honest. I was like, I don't know if I have the time to give you all the time that you need to get it started, but I'm definitely happy to support. And I think that when you're working with students, something to focus on is that you will definitely run into that where you'll have the students who can be there every step of the way, and you might have some students who may not be able to have this schedule as open because they have X amount of responsibilities, right, going on. And that's okay. Basically, I was really thankful with the team on campus that were very flexible with that and understanding and basically accepting the help and looping me in as much as they could. And we were able to get some good work done by doing so and continue recruiting. And so we started recruiting, and again, this was pre-COVID, so I'll cut it short just because I think it's important because we're hoping to get to that point one day. But so we were doing tabling during club events on campus, meeting people on our school, maybe making some in-person presentations to our professors. So we were kind of doing the in-person recruiting, but we want to focus today on what does post-pandemic outreach look like? How do we create a community that way? And I'll hand that over to my sister so she can kind of talk about what that's looked like so far.
Yeah, so outreach continues, when you build your group, you might think like, okay, I have my solid group, we're good. But the reality is that outreach continues. So even now, I want to say maybe 2 to 3 years down the line, we're still recruiting just because colleges, you have a fast turnaround. So I would say definitely make outreach a regular part of your effort. And now post-pandemic, what our strategies are for recruiting is we're starting to try to reach out to clubs on campus because there are those contacts usually on your school website. I would start off by looking for which club contacts are out there. And if you're a part of a club, even better, like you'll get in a lot faster. And try to get on their schedule and try to give a very brief presentation and saying like, this is what we're doing, this is our movement, this is why it matters. And hey, we're recruiting, like we're recruiting right now. If you're interested or you know anyone, please reach out. Here's our contact, or here's an application if it's an easy one so they can just get it done. And try and get interest in that way, especially if you're going to like a club that's like oriented around health or advocacy or like extracurriculars in some way. Like you'll most likely get people who get a little bit excited about it. So I would definitely try and talk to clubs. And at the end of the presentation, I would encourage you to say, hey, we're looking to talk to more clubs. If you're part of another club and you want us to come, please let us know. So that's kind of a strategy that for outreach that I think is really helpful right now in the virtual space that we're in. So I would really recommend that you try that out. And then we're also going to go ahead and continue talking about different ways that we can continue expanding our network. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to my sister so she can continue talking about this.
Yeah, and I think you have something on your screen, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So technicals. So moving on here. So for another thing that I'll say is you, of course, you want to create a community. You want to create a community because of course that's going to be a really big part of course you need there's power in numbers, right? So if you can have different students and just getting to know different students, working with great people is a big part of advocating. But then of course, you also need to network beyond with your fellow students to stakeholders, right? Who can make the decisions? Because you're trying to, pass policies or have people consider policies, right? Or educate people about a certain topic, for example, tobacco free and, health advocacy. And so when you want to do that, you can start like my sister, where it was like sending blind emails and just getting to know people. And really, sometimes it can be nerve-wracking. You'll be like, I'm just a student, and this is the vice president or something. But just know that you have your own power as a student. So try to not put yourself down on that, because you are worthy, right? Because sometimes I was like, am I? I was like, can I email this person? Am I allowed to do that? And it's like, you are. And the worst they can say is no. The worst they can say is, sorry, don't know what to do. But what can happen is if you contact somebody, let them know what's going on, and they might not be the right person to talk to, but they might know who is the right person. And I think that is definitely helpful to do if you want to start that way, where you don't know where to start, but you at least have a contact in mind to reach out to. And that could help you try to get to the person you want to talk to. Also, if you're on campus, know that you have student government, that you just have your campus government. That is a great place to start, because they will be able to point you in the right direction. And they also are the ones who will likely be able to do something about passing the policy. So, and also when you want to do that, you'll send the emails again. These days, it's all about emails. And then maybe some Zoom calls down the line. But then you do have to prepare for what we don't want to prepare for, opposition. So whenever we want to do that, you might be like, okay, well, hopefully they all like it. Hopefully they're all agreeing. But fortunately, that's not always the case. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that also prepares you to be able to be more successful in your advocating. And I'll pass this to my sister so she can talk a little bit about campus level opposition and how that can look like and how that can be dealt with.
Yeah, so like my sister mentioned, student government is a big ally that you want. And if not an ally, just a resource that you're going to be reaching out to. So that's what we started with. We reached out to student government and let them know the same thing. This is who we are. This is what we're doing. Can we talk to you? And usually you'll be surprised. They're actually really excited that students that are not in student government and reaching out to them, because it's, at least on our campus, is pretty rare. So you'll most likely get a slot like on their general meetings for you to talk to them. So I would recommend that you do that. You start there. And the way we started is letting them know, like, these are the reasons why we think you should adopt a resolution to get this policy started, right? That's like the first step you need to want to get from your campus. And the first time we went over, we were met with specifically one very vocal opposed person that kind of led the kind of snowball effect of, we're not really going to do much about it. So at that point, I would say some really important talking points when you're met with opposition is focusing on basically the success of the students. And basically, you're never going to want to blame smokers. You're never going to want to blame anybody who's not for the policy. You're just there to say, these are the benefits of the campus, and saying, as a community college, we prepare colleges for success once they transfer in the workplace, with UCs and CSUs being 100% smoke-free. We're here in the interest of every student, whether they're ready to quit to smoke or not, right? So that's the kind of like communication you want to have. You're going to say you're here to prepare smokers who aren't ready to quit to be able to manage their addiction in a way that makes them successful when they leave the campus. And also you want to have those resources available for people who are maybe considering to quit. So you're going to say, these are basically the benefits of having these policies in place. So that's what we did, and then we left these meetings and realizing we need to do something to basically manage this opposition, realizing that at this point the student government is not ready to like take it into their own hands. So what we started doing is doing surveys on campus. You know, we start with environmental surveys, basically just going on campus and saying like, do we see cigarette butts? Do we see conflicting signage? Things like that. Got the data for that. And then we went along and started collecting surveys on schools, like in our classes, like we distribute the surveys and got a couple there. And basically, fortunately for us, we did have Owen's nonprofit that helped us like kind of put the data together. But basically it's putting the data together and making it like kind of visually appealing, kind of like through bars or charts, basically a visual representation of what you found. So that's what we did. And after that, we went back to student government and we said, hi, you've seen us before. We're here to continue talking about the benefits of smoke-free policies, and we wanted to share what we've done so far. And at that point, we showed them what we had found with the environmental surveys, with the surveys on campus showing that there was an interest in having better policies on campus. And at this point, we had more interest, you know, like definitely brought up to their attention, like, wow, like this is something that the people on our campus are interested about. So at this point, we had a very positive response, and we were thinking that the resolution was going to happen, you know, and this was actually last year, I believe. It was like right before COVID happened. So we were really excited. And then right before COVID hit, we found out that they did not go through the resolution because they wanted to do in-house surveys, which is totally okay. It just meant they were interested, but they wanted to take a look for themselves. That's where we're at currently. And it's that COVID hit, and unfortunately student government is trying to figure out how to make that work in a virtual space. But that doesn't mean that we stop, right? So right now we're kind of like in this position, and that's where we're continuing on with what I mentioned earlier. It's that we're reaching out to clubs, and now we're trying to reach letters of support with the clubs to have another reason to come back to student government and say, hi, you know, we've showed you this before, but now we also have this. So, you know, definitely there's always a way to continue circling back to what you need to do, even though like maybe you hit a roadblock with the people who have the power to keep moving. So I definitely recommend for you to like never give up, definitely continue advocating and continue poking at the groups that you feel you need to be talking to, for sure. And I'll let my sister take over with a little bit more about like COVID transition, because this happened like right at the end of COVID. So my sister's going to talk about a little bit more about the COVID opposition.
So yeah, definitely. I'd say the key takeaway is there that flexibility is key, you know, like there's no right way to do it and you never really know what's going to happen, right? But I think that also kind of keeps you on your toes and prepared and finding out new ways to tackle the issues that might come in front of you, right? And so I'll give an example, and this was through CYAN, through COF. Like Andrea said in the beginning, we're part of the policy subcommittee of COF. So we work on a lot of policy to try to make statewide, basically try to make statewide efforts and policies through community colleges, et cetera. And so we were trying to pass a resolution that would basically give all community colleges in the state to consider passing a smoke-free tobacco policy 100%. And so we were working on that, and we were the first step was one of our CYAN representatives helped to present kind of our topic to the Student Senate for Community Colleges. And so she goes there, and we were expecting good news. We thought everybody agreed with us. But little did we know that there was a lot of opposition, strong opposition. And it kind of was kind of like a step back. We were like, oh shoot, okay, so now what do? We kind of felt a little bit deflated because we're like, dang, nobody likes what we're saying. And then, but instead we realized that this was an opportunity to know what people who didn't agree with, what were their concerns. And we realized some people thought that the students were going to feel left out, that it was going to create this like hostile environment of, the smokers and the non-smokers. And so then we learned that, we can tailor a message and realize that it doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. Instead, we want to include all students. And so we were able to kind of go back, redo, and ask for another invitation. And we basically said, we don't want to convince anyone, we just want to give some education, just to be able to clarify. And they gave us that opportunity. So we worked really hard on a presentation where we wanted to focus in on supporting all students. And right when we were getting ready to prepare, COVID happened. And we were, again, deflated, because we're like, okay, so we have so much opposition, and now we don't even know if we have the chance to kind of talk to people again, right? Because we didn't know if COVID was going to stop everything. But then we realized, we were like, you know what, we can completely pivot and let's do this in online presentation. So we basically had to do a 360 to do it online. And it was a really quick turnaround. Luckily we did it, and we were able to kind of get in front of them on a virtual screen again and focus on that. So basically, whenever you hit opposition, you want to make sure you listen to the other side, because their concerns are valid for them, therefore they should be valid for you. And you want to go ahead and tailor your message according to what their reservations are. And basically meet them where they're at, understand that, and kind of basically say, like, you're not against them, you are trying to support them, right? And that was the biggest message. And luckily through that, we were able to get the resolution passed, which was like such a big change, because it was strong opposition and then all of a sudden it was approval, and it was a great win. And I think it just goes back to, again, supporting your students, all students, and then also you want to make sure that you're flexible. And now our work hasn't finished. Our resolution was passed statewide, but we continue to work on making sure that that resolution is implemented. So just know that don't look for a end result that looks a certain way, because that will look differently depending on where you're at. But know that you have resources. Contact CYAN. You can, of course, contact my sister or I. We're happy to help. And be ready to be flexible, but also know that you don't have to do it alone. We're all here to support you through this process, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Definitely. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. We hope that some of our advice resonated with you and that you're excited to go back to your campuses to do similar policy work. And again, as my sister mentioned, feel free to reach out to my sister or I. CYN is a great resource, and we hope to hear from you.
Thanks, Adriana and Tatiana. We'll go ahead and jump into the next presentation. Forgot to mention earlier that if you have any questions, go ahead and use the chat box and we'll answer them after our next presenter. So I'd like to welcome Taylor Beckwith, who has been involved in tobacco control for many, many years as a youth locally, and then also on our CYN board of directors. And then she also moved on to work with COUGH, and now she is actually working in tobacco control with Breathe California in the Sacramento region. So I would like to welcome Taylor. Go ahead and take the floor.
Thanks, Andrea. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you all see it? Okay, so hi everyone, like Andrea said, my name is Taylor. Just a little bit of background. I was a youth advocate, the CYN's Youth and College Board. Then I went off to college at Whittier College down in LA. So that's the specific policy process I'll be talking about today. My senior year of college, I interned for a CTCP project down in LA, working at predominantly Latinx community colleges. And then now I ended up at Breathe California, Sacramento region, working on outdoor work sites, parks, and multi-unit housing. So I wanted to give a little bit of background on Whittier College. I'll be going over our policy process and how we engage students. So Whittier's a little bit unique. It's a 4-year private university located in LA. It's pretty small. There's only about 1,700 students, and it's predominantly Latinx with a large athlete population. That's what draws a lot of students in. So it doesn't have the system-wide policy issues like the community college system or Cal States or UCs. So everything that happens on campus happens on campus. It's very small, tight-knit, and relationships are really important there. So before the policy, the previous policy was they had designated smoking areas. There were 4 main areas on campus near the dorms, our science building, the cafeteria, and then there were no smokings in buildings. So this is the previous signage and what campus looked like with the designated areas. So things at Whittier happened a little bit uniquely. It came actually from the president. It was something she wanted to do before retirement. So there was already movement from administration before student mobilization or interest on more of the ground level. And so she was working with the head of the counseling center and the head of the wellness center to create this policy. They were starting to do some research and wanting to move in this direction, but didn't really have guidance yet, but it was coming top down, which was unique with these policies. So I went to Whittier in fall of 2016. And so they were already starting this conversation. CYAN actually told me that there was something with policy going on at Whittier and to check it out. I thought I was going to go away to college and not do tobacco control ever again, but obviously that didn't work out. And so when I got there, I found out that they had just applied for a grant and later received a grant to do the tobacco-free policy through the American Cancer Society Tobacco-Free Campus Initiative. And so starting in my sophomore year, we hit the ground running trying to get this policy implemented. So I worked as the lead intern my last 3 years, specifically on this policy. The first thing we did was build a task force. I think this is really key for campus engagement and getting things off the ground, whether you know this is the direction you're heading or you're still thinking maybe we want to do a tobacco-free policy. These are just some of the people we had on our task force. We included administration, we had us as project lead and interns. Residential life was a really big component as well because they would be enforcing and dealing with students who violated the policy once it came about. Student engagement, I will say having communications and facilities representation was really helpful in removing smoking areas and also getting advertisement out about the policy change or events, because with communications offices, they had a certain branding. So we had to jump through the hoops of colors and what it was supposed to look like. And so having their help on the task force and sit in on our conversations was really helpful. I would also say campus safety and HR are really important as well in regards to enforcement, staff, some of the issues that have been brought up in previous sessions, and student representation. So we had a Senate representative, which is our student government, athlete representatives, and sometimes we had other people pop in and out, but these were the main core members of our task force. I would say some other partners to consider. Our campus is very nested in a well-developed community. As you can see on the map, houses kind of intertwine. And so having community relations and someone from administration who sent out a newsletter informing residents that this was something that was going on, bringing in the community was important. CYAN was also really helpful for event planning. And then we had some previous relationships from our project lead. She had lived in Whittier for a long while, so she had connections with the mayor's office and some newspaper outlets to sort of get the information out there that we were looking for a policy change and garner some community support outside of the campus itself. And so in regards to policy advocacy, it was a little bit weird because we knew this is the direction we were heading. We wanted to involve students in the process, but we had the grant and this is what we were working towards. And so we already had that momentum. But we really wanted to focus on campus announcements. So we did some focus groups, which we did through the survey center. So it was an unbiased survey group. We held an art contest to get some images and some information out to students in a fun way. We did listservs and we used social media. I will say with social media, we decided to not create our own and to just tag on to the overall campus page. So whenever we had events, we would send in our flyers or our information, and that way they already had a following. It was less work on us and we were reaching more students that way. We also made a point to engage different departments on campus in letting them know that this was a policy we were heading towards. So the picture on the left, which is one of the art contest winners, is a insert that went on the tables in our cafeteria. It began with saying Whittier College is going to be tobacco free, and then we switched them out once we had the policy that said Whittier College is tobacco free. And then this sign here was rotating on our athletic screen. We rent out the football field for high school games. And so this ran the whole year up until the policy was passed, letting people know that we were going tobacco free. We wanted to make sure the public and anyone who stepped on campus knew that this was the transition and the direction we were heading towards. I will say that that was based off of, I was a golfer in college, so I had previous relationships with the athletic department. So I would say, look at your network even before you're in a tobacco advocacy role and what connections you have as a student or a faculty or whatever position you are, and capitalize on that because they're already there. Then with campus events, we did the traditional ones: Kick Butts Day, Great American Smokeout, Earth Day. We tried to engage students at different levels. So for Kick Butts Day, we involved the soccer team and put up big soccer nets and let people kick into the goals. For Great American Smokeout, we had people guess how many cigarette butts had been collected in the butt cleanup, and then we announced the winners later that week. For Earth Day, we gave out the bags and had some partnerships, which I'll talk about a little later, but we were trying here to let people know that we were heading towards a tobacco-free policy. So we did these events before the policy and after, and sort of just our material shifted a bit, and the way in which we interacted with people shifted. So our policy was signed in May of 2018 by the president before her retirement, and then it was going to go into effect in September of 2018. So then we had the issue of, how do we implement this policy? We basically have a summer to roll it out and figure everything out before students come back on campus. So policy implementation and how that all panned out. The first thing that was really important to me was removing smoking areas. So right before the policy was signed in spring of 2018, we had these temporary signs go up, which you can see on the left. It was basically a poster letting people know that who use the designated areas that we were heading towards this tobacco-free policy. We tried to incorporate it sort of as a transition phase. There was some leniency in the early stages of fall of 2018 when the policy was effective to let people transition, but we wanted to start the transition and the knowledge a little earlier. We also, in the summer of 2018, facilities removed all of the ash cans that were on top of the trash cans, and then my boss attempted to put these cute flower pots in the top to hopefully remove triggers, but they didn't last long. So I would say if you are looking at redoing designated areas, something that can't be removed or is more permanent, I would say come up with some ideas. It was a good idea, but it didn't last too long. So in regards to signage, this is something where it depends on your campus. The two outer permanent signs we had designed and installed, facilities put in for us. We had pre-marked a map, so during the summer they went and put them all up based on where we had indicated. But the middle two pictures, we had window clings, and we had some weird pre-existing tiles that said smoke-free area. So we just ordered stickers that went over the top of them. But facilities refused to put these up. So last minute, I was on campus already working orientation and training, so I had to go put them all up. So just being aware that things are going to change and having an involved student was helpful, because sometimes your partners don't want to do all of it. So they were helpful with the permanent signs, but just having that flexibility to jump in as needed. Then with campus outreach, this was sort of done throughout the whole process, but we used student listserv, mass emails. With admissions tours, we worked with the admissions department throughout the whole process. As we were about to transition to a tobacco-free policy, we asked them to tell students as they were giving tours. As once we had the policy, we asked them to, as they walked by a sign, wherever they were on campus, to mention it and at least point it out. Campus events, we used campus events throughout the whole process, with either educating on tobacco, educating on the policy, telling people about the new policy, flyers and social media. Having communications was helpful to get the policy posted on the website, as well as cessation resources linked to that. And then having the signage, as well as we set up a separate email for feedback. So if anyone had was upset, liked the policy, had any information or had questions, we had a specific tobacco-free email that they could reach out to that was put on all of our resources and flyers and information. I just want to touch on compliance and enforcement a bit. I know it's on student engagement, but it's a part of our process. So our enforcement plan, we worked really hard to make sure that it was a mix of compliance and enforcement that was social and had a little bit of punitive. We didn't want it just to be a fine system. Whittier College is a liberal arts, very social justice based school. So that was really important to our stakeholders and our campus environment to make sure we had that community engagement piece and social justice equity piece. So we created the engagement piece of shared responsibility. Our focus was really educating student leaders, staff, faculty, campus safety, and administration. Campus safety did not want to be the core enforcers, like they often don't. So we really wanted that shared societal norm change on campus. We created courtesy cards. It's something we had learned from partners, basically like business cards to remind people of the policy. We did develop a reporting form and some sanctions with our Title IX office and our Dean of Students office. And then we always offered educational trainings and tobacco treatment options on campus. I'm going to go over this quickly, but if you have questions on our reporting system or how that worked, we just really mirrored it with other campus policies, so the alcohol or the other drug use policies, because we didn't want it to be targeting smokers or anything different than what was already being enforced on campus. We really wanted it to match. And students already knew how to use these forms for bias reporting or sexual assault, so we thought if it matches, they're going to use it more. In regards to our sanctions, so if people violated the policy, I thought it was really important based on my time with COUGH to have this set up before we had the policy. So we worked, I Zoomed a lot with the coordinator back in that summer transition to iron all these details out before students returned to campus. So we ended up going with first steps, a warning, then an educational training and a quiz, then a restorative essay. And then after that, it hit a fine and a fine increase, which was to be determined by that office. So we also just wanted to make sure that we gave that education and those options and multiple chances before we reached any financial barriers. We also, international students on campus, this is a little bit unique to Whittier. We have international students that come from a week up to a year through a subcontracted organization called Kaplan. So we wanted to figure out how do we do enforcement with these students? They're not in our system like our regular students are. How do we educate them with cultural differences as well? So we decided to not use a fine system, to focus on education. We really simplified the language since not all of them knew English, and we really relied on our partners and our engagement with this representation in that office to engage with their students. We provided that office with a lot of quick hits, and they would just email me with any questions, but we really partnered with that staff in that office. So that relationship came really in handy. And so going into student or campus engagement and how we tried to engage the whole campus in this, I will say I was the main student leader in this. We didn't have a whole big group of students who was ready to push this issue. So building the relationships with staff and campus as a whole was sort of the approach I took, since we didn't have a team of students ready to go advocate. So we engaged students with this new policy through integration into orientation. Since we were starting that policy in the fall, we made sure orientation staff was trained on the policy, what it included. We made sure there was extra signage all around campus. So we had the permanent signs, but we took this sign design and we made it into posters for the residential halls. We put it on TV screens in our science building. We threw it up in flyers. We printed it in stake signs in the ground. And we made sure that when admissions was touring guests and families around campus, they knew that it was a tobacco-free campus and why. We also worked on general education basically throughout the whole process, but mostly once we adopted the policy. We had installments. So basically every couple weeks they put them on the back of the bathroom stall. So we did a couple on tobacco through my time at Whittier. We also did a role-playing video on enforcement and how to use the courtesy cards. We had flyers in the residential hall. So I have two pictured here. The one on the left is what we used, very generally basic, more specifically for the international dorms because it's very simple language. And then we did some more educational ones that the RAs either hung up or passed out on specific topics and more information heavy for the traditional students. We always had tobacco treatment resource sheets at our events or in training packets. And then we had the option for students if they wanted to participate in Fresh Start trainings and learn how to facilitate cessation for students. The campus training that we gave to students and staff, we had a PowerPoint presentation that I gave to various groups. We also had a blue and green sheet is what we called them. So the information sheet, the blue sheet had all the policy basics and the implementation process. So what does the policy include? What products? Where is it prohibited? Also, how did it come about? That was a lot of the questions we got of who created this policy? Why is it here? So we wanted our student leaders to be prepared with that information. We also provided them with the sanction flowchart, a courtesy card, and a script for how to interact with individuals. We really wanted them to be as prepared as possible to interact with students who had opposition or who wanted to know why this happened and changed on campus. So some of the groups we trained and engaged with were the orientation team, residential advisors, because they would be interacting with students on a frequent basis or enforcing this, the Kaplan staff, the international staff, conference staff. So Whittier uses the dorms during the summers to have conferences and different events. So we trained them on how to explain the policy change on campus. I also met with campus safety pretty frequently and discussed with them what this looked like, especially after we passed the policy. I presented to all of their staff on what we wanted this to look like and how that partnership would work now that we had a policy. The Veterans Office, we also worked with. Student Senate was fully trained, and then other student organizations who were interested, a couple here and there, which was heavily based on previous campus relationships I had. So campus giveaways, we usually gave these out at trainings, but sometimes we gave out the stickers at events. So for the pins, we gave them at all of our trainings. That was part of our grant funding. So when we gave them a packet, we gave them a pin. During orientation, all staff was required to wear it as a way to show people that we were having this policy change, as well as just a way to advocate and show the movement we had on campus. Then with event partnerships, the event picture up at the top was Great American Smokeout. So we partnered with the Wellness Coalition. They have student interns, and we collaborated on tobacco trivia, ways to quit, and did some raffle prizes. And then the picture with the two posters, I partnered with the Sustainability Club. They had helped us with a cigarette butt cleanup. And so as you can see, the two bins in the picture were compared between before the policy and after the policy. So we had a comparison from previous years, and they took on the role of creating how tobacco impacts the environment and made the full poster and did that whole engagement process. So that was a community relationship we were able to build. And then an overall wrap up for campus partnerships. Some of these are what I wanted to do and ran out of time before graduation and due to COVID, or were things that I had learned from other positions, but cultural groups. So I really wanted to do a Black Lives, Black Lungs video with the BSU student organization. I approached them, but they were having some leadership transitions, and then COVID happened, so that didn't happen. But there's opportunities to get involved with those organizations on campus. The business and economic department, you can always talk about the financial implications of tobacco or how it affects the healthcare system. Environmental clubs, these are also ways to get students involved. Health and nursing groups, honor societies, sometimes they're always looking for guest speakers. LGBTQ plus organizations, on-campus daycare, I know that was mentioned in a session earlier. Connecting tobacco to psychology and mental health or social justice. Residential services, RAs often need programming ideas. So if you can hop in there and provide a training, then that's less work for them, and they often like that. Sociology, social worker related departments. I had a couple social work professors ask if I could speak on campus organizing or how this policy could be enforced on campus. And then veteran services, you can always partner with them for a Veterans Day event and talk about the military and rates of tobacco use in that community. And then just some overall engagement tips. I think this was mentioned earlier, but meeting students where they are, if they only want to be involved a little bit or want to be the full-blown student lead, accepting that engagement at any level, and faculty or other campus leaders as well. Also, I would say make it clear what you want out of a partnership. If you're going to a group, do you want to present to them? Do you want them to fully participate in a butt cleanup? What do you want from them? And they'll be more willing to accept that. Don't expect everyone to be as passionate about it as you are. Taking leadership with organizing, if you want to host an event, then try to have everything done for them, make it less work for them, and then ensure students have a balance between being an advocate, a student, and their other roles. They have a lot going on. And so thank you. If you have any questions, my email is there, and then our policy for Whittier College is posted on the campus website if you are interested. Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor. I had mentioned in the chat if we're running a little late, so if you want to take a few minute break before we head into the general session, feel free to do so. I think we have time for a few questions if anyone has any. Otherwise, Adriana, Tatiana, and Taylor, if you'd like to put your email in the chat box if people have any questions for you after the workshop series.
I was going to ask a question. Are they still working with Las Positas, the two sisters?
I didn't hear the last part, but we are still working with Las Positas.
I'm at Chabot College, so I'm trying to how we work together. Maybe we can. I'd like to do that with you. Yeah. Okay. I'll get your email. I'll get in touch with you because
yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Okay, because I'm almost there, so we can help each other.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Great to hear from you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there. So I think this COVID was mentioned a lot here, quite understandably. Right now, the coalition we're working with, we've been doing a lot of giving presentations and having them develop presentations, but it feels a lot like homework right now. I was wondering if like, we can't do campus observations really, or we're not allowed on campus. I know you talked about data collection. I was wondering if you have any other tips or advice about engaging students without making it feel like a class.
Yeah, I think it definitely is a lot harder now with COVID. I would say a lot of the engagement comes through making sure to connect back to the effort and like why, especially right now with COVID, like we have a really big need for having these policies in place, especially now that there's research that shows that vaping and smoking actually increases your risk for like even more complications for COVID-19. So circling it back to there, and I think starting to make those connections of asking these students, like, who do you know on campus? Like, are you part of any clubs? I think that's kind of been like our angle. It's trying to focus on the clubs that we know and trying to talk to them through that, because I think that's where we get away a little bit from like the homework part of it and starting to feel like, okay, there's a community out here, and it's just talking to the clubs and asking like, hey, like, if you're interested, and building these letters of support. I think that's like kind of like the alternative to survey collecting, just because surveys are really hard right now. Getting letters of support from these clubs and getting those tangible evidence that you can later come back to student government or other organizations and show them like, look, these are the groups that are supporting us, and getting a little bit more tangible, I believe. I don't know if I can say something.
Yeah. I'll kind of build off of that, but kind of say like, I know that it can, during this time, even if we're in COVID, it's definitely still possible, first. And second, I would say students are trying to get involved in whatever way they can, but they don't know how a lot of times during the pandemic. So they are, as students, they have the pressure of having something on their resume, being able to get involved, doing something beyond being a student, right? That's a big pressure that students face. So I think that's something that you can try to work with students, where you can give them the opportunity to grow their skills as a leader in their community, and then also work together on something that they might find that they're passionate about. So I would say definitely trying to reach out to where the students are. And that could be social media, that could be clubs like we've mentioned, or just talking to people in their class. That's one idea. And so basically letting them know there's this opportunity for you to get involved, giving them a little bit of an idea of what it's for. And you'll be surprised that there's a lot of students who are just trying to find that opportunity to build a community and work on a project that's beyond school. So definitely, I'd say that's one idea.
Sorry, just in the interest of time, I will feel free to contact Taylor, Adriana, and Tatiana after the presentation. We'll go ahead and go into the closing session, and feel free to join us. We encourage it. We want to make an action plan. So thank you all for being on this call, and thank you so much. We will see you in the general room.